Part 1, perception. Everything that happens in the world before we can do anything about it has to first pass through a filter of sorts. It's like we're all wearing goggles or lenses or glasses that are compiled of our belief systems and our values. And so literally the way that we see the world is different from that of others. And that is our perception. Having this as an aspect of Stoicism is that it's something that is within our control to a large extent to decide what aspects of that filter are changeable. What beliefs are serving us or not serving us, that is causing us to see the world in a way that is useful or not so useful. In this book, The Obstacle is the Way, in this perception chapter, we're given 10 different subsets of things to kind of dive into to make sure that the way that we are viewing the world is useful to be able to successfully operate and to go into action. And the first aspect of perception that we explore is that perspective is a discipline. It's something that we can actually take control of and work on. And it gives the example, I think a great example, of John D. Rockefeller, because you've heard the name, you might want to recap the history of this guy. He was not born into privilege, even though we know he becomes just insanely successful. He actually had a very, very modest, lower middle class upbringing, almost closer to poverty. His dad was actually a scam artist, criminal. He did not come up in the best way. But when he was 16, he went out and got a job and he started working as a bookkeeper. He wanted to be an investor and he was just ready to get after it. And as he was finally getting the hang of things, this recession hit, kind of like the recession that we're dealing with right now. It was 1857. It became known as the Panic of 1857. It was one of the first times that a market crisis kind of swept across the nation because the telegram was now a thing. So as soon as one bank was experiencing issues, all the banks started experiencing issues. The value of grain started plummeting, which was a major resource back then, and it just kind of got everyone into a scared place where they were much more hesitant to invest. And it was probably the worst recession that the nation had seen at that time. And it was right when John D. Rockefeller was kind of getting his bearings. He saw this as an opportunity to learn. He called this his baptism into the market. He sat back and observed the mistakes that people were making and was able to keep his cool. And this is where he really earned his stripes and became recognized as someone who could keep calm even when things were going crazy. He learned to keep his head while losing his shirt. But even better off, learn to keep your head while other people are losing theirs. That kind of became his go-to thing. And it served him well. Because obviously recessions always come to an end, and once this one did, and a few years later, now he's 25, he's got a solid reputation as someone who knows his things, and there was a group of investors that gives him $500,000. This is a ton of money at the time, and they're seeing this oil market that is emerging, and they say, go and explore the oil markets, use our $500,000 to choose the best sites. And so he's excited, he goes out, and he actually ends up coming back after having evaluated and saying the timing is not right, and he gives back the $500,000. This is amazing to me because I don't know if I'd be able to resist the temptation to just invest it even if it wasn't the right timing, just because of the potential upside. But he kept his cool. He did things differently, and this is why he became so successful. 20 years after this, he owned 90% of the oil market. He went on to become the richest man America has ever seen, respective to his time. And it all began because he learned that he could control his perspective, that he could change his lens to see that even the volatility of the market could serve him. That was actually an upside to a savvy investor to realize that the market was so unpredictable and crazy, and that if he just kept calm, that it would serve him well. Warren Buffett, obviously one of the most successful investors of our day, who studied the life of John D., he coined the phrase that you've probably heard before, and that is to be greedy when others are being fearful, and fearful when others are being greedy. That comes from the life of John D. Rockefeller, and that aspect came from him keeping his cool during a recession. And so we have the same opportunity all the time to learn and to adjust the filter that we're seeing things through. And the other part of this section of the discipline of perception that Ryan Holiday dives into is to realize that our brains evolved in a completely different environment than we're in today. And so when we feel like that kind of panic, that onset of of just nerves and our heart racing and all of this kind of fear over a financial situation or something like that, that our brain is actually releasing the kind of chemicals to save ourselves from like a saber-toothed tiger and things like that. And so to realize that today, even though we're having that response, we feel like we might die, that we're not actually going to die and that we are okay, and to kind of bring ourselves to the present moment and realize that almost all of the fears that we're experiencing are in the future, but that in the present moment, there's actually nothing that is threatening us. And that's part of the thing that we can have the discipline to adjust on lens or the filter that we're seeing the world through. It's going to help us recognize that things aren't necessarily good or bad at all. They just are. They're just things. It's the judgments and the beliefs that we have about those things, what's part of our perspective, part of that filter, that is actually labeling it or making us. So that's the first aspect of perception, is to realize that there's a discipline to tweaking and making sure that the perspective is serving us in a way that's going to keep us going toward our goals.